Hey there, breathtaking human. Today we're going to talk about something that is very close to my heart: integrity and sex. As part of the LGBTQIA community, we know that sex can be complicated, but it's essential to approach it with honesty, integrity, respect, and love. So let's dive in. Have you ever done something sexually that didn't work for you, but you went along with it anyway? Maybe you didn't feel comfortable or safe, or maybe it just didn't feel good. And sometimes our curiosity gets the better of us and we push ourselves forward to see what it's like, only to discover that it doesn't work. Whatever the reason, you knew deep down that it wasn't right for you, but you went ahead and did it anyway. I know I have. When it comes to sex, you might be tempted to do something that doesn't feel right to please someone else or put someone else's needs before your own. But remember, it's crucial to remember that compromising your integrity will only lead to regret and pain. So, what is integrity? Integrity means being whole and complete. At a deep level, it is honoring yourself. So, what is the self? The self with a capital S is your higher self, the biggest expression of yourself. This self is eternal and exists beyond our concept of time. When we operate from our higher self, we have a say in who we are, and who we are is whole and complete. Self with a lowercase s is the flawed, broken, damaged, and diminished self. It is the smaller self filled with our humanness. When we operate from the smaller self, we are coming from a place of something missing. And this leads us to wanting an external source to fix us, yearning from a place of brokenness, or looking for love in all the wrong places. So, what does this sexual integrity look like? Maintaining sexual integrity involves being honest and true to oneself and others about one's sexual desires, boundaries, and actions. It means aligning our actions with our values and commitments. This can include respecting consent, practicing safe sex, avoiding harm to oneself or others, and not engaging in dishonest or manipulative behavior. Furthermore, having sexual integrity can also involve embracing one's own sexuality without shame or judgment and promoting a culture of mutual respect and acceptance. So, what happens when we compromise our integrity? When we compromise our integrity, we betray ourselves. We send ourselves a message that our feelings, our desires, and our boundaries don't matter. We might feel like we're pleasing someone else or being accepted, but in reality, we're only impacting ourselves. The impact of compromising our integrity can be profound. It can cause us to feel shame or guilt and self-loathing. It can lead to a loss of self-respect and self-worth. We might feel like we've betrayed ourselves, and that feeling can linger for a long time. These are the damages that always leave us feeling smaller, the small s self. A lack of sexual integrity can lead to other negative consequences as well, such as emotional distress, broken relationships, STIs, sexually transmitted infections, and unethical behavior. It's important to understand and prioritize your values and boundaries when it comes to sex and make informed and responsible decisions that align with integrity. The truth is, when we compromise our integrity, we will always feel rotten afterward, every single time. It's like the law of gravity. It's the same result every time. We might try to brush it off or rationalize it away, but deep down, we know that we've done something that doesn't align with our values or beliefs. Understand and consent. Consent is the foundation of healthy sexual relationships. It means that all parties involved have given enthusiastic and informed permission for sexual activity. It's essential to remember that consent is ongoing and can be withdrawn at any time. And that means any time, including just before climax. It's not something that can be assumed or coerced. It must be given freely. A magic word. So sometimes we get very clear and strong messages that we don't want to continue. But what about those times, those moments when we are not sure or we question ourselves? The best course of action is to use one simple word. That word is pause. Pause is a beautiful way to literally pause the action, to breathe and reassess. It feels less intrusive and not as much of an interruption as stop, and it's less likely to dampen the intimacy that was building between you. When we prioritize boundaries and consent, we honor our integrity. We acknowledge our feelings, desires, and limits, and we communicate them clearly to our partners. We also respect their boundaries and consent, creating a safe and consensual space for exploration and intimacy. It's also important to remember that boundaries and consent are not a one-time thing. They're ongoing conversations that should happen before, during, and after sexual activity. They're also something that can change over time at any time, and it's okay to revisit them and adjust as needed. And of course, setting boundaries and giving or withdrawing consent can be challenging, especially if we're not used to doing it. It might feel uncomfortable or vulnerable to express our desires or limits, but it's worth it. When we communicate our needs, we're advocating for ourselves and our well-being. So how do I communicate effectively with a sexual partner or partners? Communication is key when it comes to setting boundaries and giving or withdrawing consent in sexual relationships. So here are some tips on how to communicate effectively with your partner or lover about this topic. Number one, set aside time to talk. It's important to have a dedicated time and space to discuss boundaries and consent with your partner. This could be over dinner or going for a walk in the park. But make sure that you both have enough time to discuss the topic without feeling rushed or with something else urgently needing your attention. 2, use I statements. When discussing boundaries and consent, it's important to use I statements instead of you statements. For example, say, I'm not comfortable with whatever it is, instead of you always do this. You can hear the blame in that, right? So this way, you're expressing your own feelings and needs without blaming or shaming your partner. 3, be specific. When setting boundaries, it's important to be specific about what you're comfortable with and what you're not. For example, you might say, I'm not comfortable with this act or this act. This way, there's no confusion about it. Don't do what I just did and say this act or that act. Actually be specific and pick the actual act, the sexual act itself, the action. This way, there's no confusion about what's off limits. And if you do find this difficult to speak about, shame might be lurking and getting in the way of you being able to say the words freely. Remember, shame is always inherited. It's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. Sometimes you literally have to just get up and shake it off. 4, listen actively. So communication is a two-way street. When your partner is expressing their boundaries or concerns, make sure to listen actively. What this means is giving them your full attention, asking clarifying questions and not interrupting. 5, respect each other's boundaries. Once you've discussed your boundaries, it's essential to respect them. This means not pressuring your partner to do something they're not comfortable with, even if it's something that you really want to do. It also means being open and receptive to your partner's needs and boundaries. 6, check in regularly. As mentioned earlier, boundaries and consent can change over time, so it's important to check in with your partner regularly and to see if their boundaries have shifted. This way you can adjust your behavior accordingly and continue having a healthy and consensual sexual relationship. Overall, communication is essential when it comes to integrity in sex. By setting aside time to talk, using I statements, being specific, listening actively, and respecting each other's boundaries and checking in regularly, you can create a safe and consensual space for exploration and intimacy. Communicating boundaries and acting consensually are essential actions to honoring your integrity in sexual relationships. By communicating effectively with your partner, you can ensure that both parties, both yourself and your partners, feel safe, respected, and fulfilled. Remember, you deserve to explore your sexuality with integrity, honesty, and respect. So in conclusion, integrity and sex go hand in hand. When we prioritize our integrity by setting boundaries and giving consent, we honor ourselves and create healthy and fulfilling sexual relationships. When we compromise our integrity, we betray ourselves and open the door to regret and pain. Remember, you are worthy of love. You're worthy of respect and of pleasure. Your boundaries and consent matter, and they deserve to be respected. So go forth and explore your sexuality with integrity, honesty, and respect. Happy exploring. And listen, if you've enjoyed this conversation, you're going to love the 5 ways to reignite the spark video and checklist that I've made for you. It's all about the number 1 problem that keeps queer, lesbian, and non-binary couples from having a fulfilling sex life. So you can go to danikalani.com/spark or go down to the comments and click on the link there. Enjoy. Your body so close to mine, I swear we come undone.